Good afternoon, students. Today we're going to learn about how we can calculate percent of a number. We're going to be talking about percentages pretty soon here and even when we get back from Thanksgiving break. So we want to make sure that we learn how to calculate a percent. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And so we're going to go over just a few ways that you can calculate a percent of a number today, and then we'll learn some more in class also. So we're going to pretend that you're at your favorite store. So in this blank right here, you can put your favorite store name. And you see a 30% off sign on whatever item you might like. So you can go ahead and fill that in. And your item is usually $150. We want to know how much you are saving with the 30% off. And then we want to figure out what the new cost of your favorite item would be. So first we're going to talk about ways that we can figure out percentages that always work. So the first method that always works is using a decimal. And so we call it the decimal method. Now after we go over this and we do some practice and you try it, eventually I want you to rate it. Whether you like it, that's me gusta. In Spanish that means I like or something like that. Or no me gusta, I did not like it or I did not understand it is what you could circle for that one. So what you would do first for the decimal method is change your percent to a decimal. We learn in 6th grade and maybe even before that we chop off our decimal sign. And if I want a decimal, I move to the left and I move 2 times. That's your butt cheek math. Everybody has 2, not 1, not 3. So you got to move 2 times. And since I want a decimal, I go to the left. So 30% is the same as 0.30. Once I have my percentage as a decimal, I just multiply the decimal with the whole, or that total cost originally of 150. So I'm going to take my decimal 0.30 and I'm going to multiply that with 150. So I can come off here to the side 150, and let's not make our math more difficult. Instead of multiplying by 0.30, let's just leave off the 0 at the end. Okay, so I have 0.3 times that 150. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply everything here. And when I do that, I get 450, but I have to remember to count my place values behind my decimal point. So I have 1 place value. This one doesn't have any place values behind its decimal. So I'm going to move 1 time in my answer. So I get 45. 0.30 times 150 is 45. What does that number mean to me in this problem? Does that mean how much I'm going to pay for my item? Does it make sense that if my item was $150 and I'm getting only 30% off, that's less than 50%, less than half, am I only going to pay that? That doesn't really make sense. That's the amount that I'm saving. So that $45 is 30%. That's how much they're taking off of the original price. So if they're taking off $45, that means my 150 original cost minus the $45, I'll pay $105 for that favorite item of mine. So this might be useful for you. If you can practice before break how to find percent of a number, maybe you can convince your parents to do some shopping for you, some items, for gifts and things like that if there's some sales next week during Black Friday time. Let's practice one more together using the decimal method, and then I'm going to teach you a few other ways. So this problem says a baseball pitcher won 80% of the games that he pitched at. If he pitched at 35 ball games, how many games did he win? So we can change that 80% to a decimal by chopping off that percent sign, going 2 times to the left because I want a decimal, and that's 0.80. Or just 0.8. Now I need to multiply that with the total amount of games, the 35. So I have 35 times 0.8. I'm going to go ahead and multiply that. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 3 is 24. Plus 4 more is 28. And then I'm going to circle my place values behind my decimal points. And that tells me 28. 80% of 35 is 28 games. And since 80% is the ones that they won, that is how many he won when he was a pitcher. So 28 games is our answer there. Okay, I want you to do this last one using the decimal method. Okay, so we'll let you practice that, and then you will see if you get that right or not when you get your homework back. So let's look at the next method that we can use. So the next method is another always works method. So if you look at the next one, it says method 2. It's called the 1% method. And this will be a good one that I think a lot of you like, so you'll probably want to use this one a lot. It always works, just like the other method we just practiced, the decimal method. Remember to go back and rate how you liked each method so you know which ones you want to use later. So sometimes it's useful to know 1% of a number. So let's figure out how we do that. What is 1%? Well, we just practiced changing a percent to a decimal. So let's do that and see how many place values there are in 1%. So if I chop off my percent sign, and then I'm going to make it a decimal, I go to the left 2 times, that's 0.01. That's 2 place values behind my decimal point. So, to find 1% of a number, all you have to do is move the 2 decimal places, guys. So if I want 1% of 100, I can go 1, 2 to the left, and that's $1. If I want 1% of 200, I can move it to the left 2 times, that's $2. If I want 1% of 300, I can move it to the left 2 times, and that's $3. If I want 1% of 400, I move 2 times to the left again, and I get $4. Okay, 1% of 500, 2 times to the left, I get $5 then. If I want to figure out 1% of 550, I can move 2 place values to the left, and that's $5.50. Or if I want 1% of $570, I can move 2 to the left, that's $5.70. Last one for this quick example, I have 1% of $1,200. If I move it 2 times to the left, 1 little percent of a whole $1,200 is $12. And that makes sense because 1,200 is a pretty big number. 1% is very small compared to the whole 100%. So it should be a small number. So what was our quick method for finding 1% of any number? Well, that was to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So what you want to do is just move your decimal point 2 place values to the left. And that's all you need to do to know 1% of a number. Now, why would that be helpful to me? Well, once you know 1% of a number, you can use that to calculate any percentage. And so I'm going to show you what I mean by that. If I can figure out 1% of something, then I can answer pretty much any other percentage for that amount. So here it says Erin earned $200 last summer. She saved 9% of what she earned. We want to know how much money did she save then? Well, I could use the decimal method and I could change this to a decimal and multiply, but what if I didn't really like that method? Well, let me just figure out what 1% of her 200 is, and we do that by moving it 2 times to the left. So 1% of 200 is $2. Well, how does that help me? I wanted 9%. So if I want 9%, let's see what that would be. 9% of 200, well, to get from 1% to 9%, how many of those $2 do I need? Well, I would need 9 of them. So I could do 2 times 9. Since 1% 9 times gets you to 9%, I can do that $2 times 9, and that tells me that 9% of $200 is $18. So if she saved just 9% and she only made $200, that means she put $18 in her savings account. Okay, let's do one more, practicing the 1% method, and then I'll let you try one on your own also. So Manuel found a wrecked Trans Am that he could fix. He bought the car for 65% of the original price, that was $7,200. What did he pay for the car? Well, first we need to figure out 1% of $7,200. To do that, we move 2 times to the left, so that tells me it's $72. Now, we didn't want 1% though. We wanted him to only pay 65%. So I need to get from 1 to 65 by multiplying by 65. That means I can do 72 times 65, and it'll tell me what 65% of that 7,200 is. It'll tell me how much he actually paid for his Trans Am. So if I set up my 72 times 65, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 7 is 35, plus 1 more is 36. Bring my 0, or put my placeholder 0. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 7 is 42, plus 1 more is 43. So if I add this all up carefully here, we have $4,680. Does that make sense? Well, he did pay a little bit more than half. This is more than half, since 50% would be half. He paid more than half of the original cost. Half of 3,200 would be like 3,600. So yeah, he paid a little bit more than half. My answer makes sense. Okay, I want you to go ahead and do that last one once you're done taking notes, and then you can see if you got that one right or not if you go to tutoring tomorrow morning or when you get your paper back. Let's talk about one other way that you can find percent of a number. Now, this is a sometimes works method. You would only want to use this one when you have a good percentage, and you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. This is our 10% method. Okay, so sometimes it's useful to know 10% of a number. Well, how would we find 10% of a number? Well, 10%, if I change that to a decimal, I can chop that off, move 2 times to the left. 10% is just 0.1. How many place values are behind that decimal? Well, it's only one place value this time. So I bet that means I can move one place value to the left. 10% of 200 is $20. So then if we use that same little method, if I move one place to the left here, 10% of $800 is $80. Okay, 10% of 480 must be 48 then, after I move my decimal one time to the left. And I want to know 10% of 48. Well, if I move my decimal one place to the left, that's $4.80. Okay, I want to know 10% of 64. Move it one time to the left. That's $6.40. I want to know 10% of a whole $1,500. So I'm going to move it one time to the left. 10% of $1,500 is $150. Okay, so we can use a little trick there, a quick method, to figure out 10%. So the quick way that we used, that we did to find 10% of any value is to move the decimal one place value to the left. So we want to move one place value to the left. Now, if we know 10% of a number, we can use that to calculate other percents. It didn't say any percent. That's why this is a sometimes works method. So let's see if we could use our 10% for this problem. It says the Sweater Shack is offering a 70% discount on sweaters. If the regular price of the sweater is $1,500, that's a really expensive, ugly sweater for Christmas. What is the discount? Okay, well, let's see. I can figure out 10% of $1,500 by moving my place value one time. That's $150. Why can we use 10% this time? Well, we wanted 70%. Can we get from 10 to 70 with a math fact? Sure we can. 10 times 7 is 70. So that means I can do my 150 times 7, and that'll tell me 70% of 1,500. So let's see, our 150, 7 times, that's a 0, that's 35, and that would be 10. That's $1,050. That's a big discount. That's even more than half, and it should be. We're getting more than half off. So if this is my discount, we need to subtract the discount you found here from that regular price to figure out the sale price. So regular price, it was $1,500. I'm going to save $1,050. So how much will I pay for that sweater? Well, I can go ahead and 0 minus 0, 0, borrow 1 from the 5 there. So that's 5 now. That's $450. I still don't think I would buy that sweater, but I would consider it now. Let's try one more and see if you've got the 10% down. So Todd is to receive a 30% discount on a $90 graphing calculator. I guess he's in high school or college. He has to buy an expensive calculator. We want to know how much of a discount is he going to get. So we can start by figuring out 10% of the $90 calculator. And that's by moving my decimal one time to the left. So that means he's going to save $9 if it was only 10% off. But it's 30% off. So can we get from 10% to 30%? Well, sure. 10% 3 times would tell us 30%. So I need this 10% number 3 times. And that tells me that 30% of $90 is $27. So how much of a discount will he get? $27 off. You will try this last problem, and then you're all done with your homework tonight. If I went a little too fast, you need to review something, feel free to watch the video again as many times as you need to, and make sure that you come in for tutoring tomorrow if you still have any questions. Have a great evening. See you soon.